foundation may grow, for there is so much joy to be found when we can share the practice of folding paper together. But if you would rather listen alone, know that this too is a beautiful path, one that will unfold in time. And I am here if you need me. I'm sure you will find your way. Never rush an act of kindness. Time plays its part. Anything is possible. It was perfectly quiet when Koa stepped out of the house. It was very early, so the street lamps that stood guard outside her home were still wide awake, smiling and chatting away with the others that lined the street. "Good morning, Miss Koa," they said as she passed them by, each one bowing deeply as she made her way towards the end of the road. "Good morning to you too, sir," she whispered back as she scurried up the hill. It was Monday, visiting day, and each week she would wake up long before the rising sun and head to the hospital to visit her grandfather, who had been a guest there for some time now. Koa was only 8 years old, but she would make this trip alone, as her parents worked long hours, and so in the mornings they would sleep in until after sunrise before heading back to the factories. Her brother, Bailey, was too young to make the trip, so he too stayed behind. As she started her journey towards the train station at the top of the hill, a trip she had taken many times before, she began to pick up the pace. The train left at 4:55 each morning, and she knew she wouldn't make it if she didn't hurry. "I can't miss the boarding call," she whispered to herself as she hurried along. If only she had left the house just 2 minutes earlier, she would have not been in such a predicament. She would later scold herself for this inefficiency. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone to check she had already paid for her ticket. Not doing so had caused delays in the past, and proper etiquette, as they were taught in school, was to always be prepared for what's next. But then she remembered something her grandfather used to say when they went for their you and me walks, Yumi, as he would call them. During these wanders, grandfather would walk painfully slow, stopping many times to look up at the sky, for he enjoyed watching the wandering clouds. He would say, "Clouds never rush, yet they always arrive, so why should we?" Koa did not agree with many of his funny sayings. She thought they were fantasies of his aging mind, but she missed these moments dearly and remembered them fondly. In reality, it did not matter if she missed the first train, since the second one would be along a few minutes later, and both stopped just outside the hospital, so either would get her to her destination on time. But for Koa, this wasn't the point. Efficiency was everything. Visiting hours began at 7 a.m., and Koa prided herself on always being the first one through the door. Other visitors, who knew her, would often let her pass to the front of the queue if only to help appease her ambitious mind. As she reached the station, the train was waiting on the platform. It had stayed a few moments longer today to ensure she was on board. It was kindness like this that had helped soothe her anxious soul and made the journey ahead easier to manage. As she climbed the last stair on the platform clearing, she took a moment to zip her jacket up tight. The windows on the train had lots of cracks in them, so a chilly draft would often blow through the carriage. It took 2 hours and 2 minutes exactly to get into town, and during this time, she would look out the window as the world sped by. A litany of cement monoliths and towering ascents dwarfed the hustling ants that scurried by. She very much enjoyed this time on the train, and some days she secretly wished the ride would never end. It was the fastest she'd ever gone in her life, and she knew that someday soon, when grandfather returned home, she would no longer have these adventures. Trains were an icon of efficiency, and everything these days ran digitally, so there was no possibility of human error. This was a rule that had been put in place long before she was born to ensure that the pleasantries of the past did not interfere with the progress of the future. Childhood was not seen as a time for fantasy or frivolity. It was an organized sequence of efficient preparations, and life was a regimented schedule of advancement and technology. Anything that was deemed inefficient had been